It was just another day at 30,000 feet above sea level, or so Dan Bongino thought, as he settled into his first-class seat on a cross-country flight. Little did he know that one simple act of kindness would set off a chain reaction no one could have predicted. Dan had always been known for standing up for what he believed in, whether it was defending freedom or supporting those who fought to protect it. But this time, instead of speaking out, he decided to take action. When he noticed a decorated veteran struggling in coach, while he himself enjoyed the luxury of first class, something inside him stirred. Without hesitation, Dan made the decision to give up his seat. But here's the twist. What happened next wasn't just heartwarming, it was jaw-dropping. You see, when word spread about Dan's selfless gesture, things took a turn nobody expected. Passengers, flight attendants, even people thousands of miles away started reacting in ways that would leave you speechless. So buckle up, because this isn't just a story about giving up a seat, it's a tale of humanity, gratitude, and the power of doing the right thing. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be asking yourself, what would I have done? Dan Bongino wasn't your average passenger. Sure, he was a well-known figure, a former Secret Service agent turned political commentator, but more than that, he carried himself with a quiet confidence and a deep sense of duty. To him, action spoke louder than words, and his life had been defined by moments where he chose to stand up for others, no matter the cost. The veteran, whose name we'll come to know later, was equally remarkable. A man in his late 40s, he bore the weight of years spent serving his country. His uniform told stories of bravery, sacrifice, and resilience. Though he now walked among civilians, there was still a certain aura around him, an unspoken pride that came from knowing he'd given everything for the freedoms many took for granted. As Dan looked across the aisle and saw the veteran crammed into a cramped coach seat, something clicked. It wasn't pity that moved him, it was respect. Respect for the service this man had rendered, respect for the sacrifices he'd made, and respect for the values they both shared. In that moment, Dan realized that first-class comfort paled in comparison to the honor of sitting alongside someone who truly deserved it. But before we dive deeper into what happened next, let's rewind slightly and understand why this encounter meant so much, not just to Dan, but to everyone involved. Because when you think about it, acts of kindness often carry hidden meanings. They're not just gestures, they're statements, and this particular statement would resonate far beyond the walls of that airplane cabin. It all started when Dan approached the veteran during boarding. The plane was bustling with noise, suitcases clattering, passengers chatting, babies crying, but somehow, their conversation stood out like a whisper in a storm. "Sir," Dan began, his voice steady and sincere, "I'd like to offer you my first-class seat. You've earned it." The veteran blinked, clearly taken aback. For a moment, he didn't respond, as if trying to process whether what he'd heard was real. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You don't have to do that," the veteran replied, shaking his head. "I'm fine back here." But Dan insisted. "No, sir, it's the least I can do. Your service means everything to me, and I want to show my appreciation." And just like that, the two men swapped seats. The veteran moved up to first class, settling into the plush leather chair with a look of quiet awe. Meanwhile, Dan took his place in coach, content with the knowledge that he'd done the right thing. At first, it seemed like just another act of kindness, one of those fleeting moments that might fade from memory by the time the plane landed. But then, something extraordinary happened. A nearby passenger noticed the exchange and snapped a photo. That picture, along with a brief caption explaining the gesture, quickly made its way onto social media. Within minutes, the post went viral. Strangers from all over the world began sharing the story, praising Dan for his selflessness and honoring the veteran for his service. Comments poured in, filled with admiration and gratitude. Some people even shared their own stories of veterans they knew, creating a ripple effect of positivity that no one could have anticipated. Little did Dan know, this simple act of kindness was about to spiral into something much bigger than either of them imagined. Because as it turned out, the veteran had secrets of his own, secrets that would soon come to light and change the course of this story forever. As the flight continued, the buzz surrounding Dan's gesture grew louder. Passengers couldn't help but talk about it. Some approached the veteran to thank him personally, while others sought out Dan to express their admiration. The cabin crew joined in, offering complimentary drinks and snacks to both men as a token of appreciation. But the real drama unfolded after the plane landed. As the passengers disembarked, a reporter from a local news station happened to be at the gate. She spotted the viral photo circulating online and recognized the two men walking off the plane. Without hesitation, she approached them with her microphone in hand. "Mr. Bongino," she said, "can you tell us more about what inspired you to give up your seat?" Dan smiled modestly. "It wasn't about me, it was about recognizing someone who has done so much for our country. I just wanted to show my respect." The reporter then turned to the veteran. "And sir, how does it feel to receive such recognition?" The veteran hesitated for a moment before speaking. His voice carried a weight that hinted at untold stories. "I'm humbled," he said softly. "But there's more to this than meets the eye." That cryptic response caught everyone off guard. The reporter pressed further. "What do you mean, sir? Is there something you'd like to share?" Before the veteran could answer, another passenger intervened, a man in his early 30s who had been seated near the pair during the flight. "You don't know the half of it," he chimed in. "This guy isn't just any veteran, he's a war hero, and not just once, but multiple times." At this point, murmurs spread through the crowd gathering around them. People began pulling out their phones, filming the exchange. The veteran looked uncomfortable under the sudden spotlight, but the truth was undeniable. Reports started flooding in, stories of his bravery on the battlefield, medals earned for acts of courage, and even accounts of how he'd saved countless lives during his service. Meanwhile, back on social media, the story took a dramatic turn. Someone dug up old interviews with the veteran, revealing details of his life after returning home. It turns out, despite his heroic deeds, he'd faced significant challenges, financial struggles, health issues, and difficulty adjusting to civilian life. Many were moved by his resilience and determination, while others felt compelled to act. Donation pages popped up almost instantly. Strangers offered jobs, scholarships, and support for his family. Businesses reached out, eager to honor him in their own ways. The wave of generosity was overwhelming, but it also raised questions. Why hadn't anyone noticed sooner? How many other heroes were out there, quietly enduring hardships without asking for help? For Dan, the situation became personal. What started as a simple act of kindness had snowballed into a movement, one that highlighted the importance of acknowledging and supporting those who serve. But the story wasn't over yet. Because as it turned out, the veteran still had one final revelation to make, and it would leave everyone speechless. As the crowd dispersed and the media frenzy began to die down, the veteran pulled Dan aside. His expression was serious, almost somber, as he gestured for them to step away from the growing audience. "Dan," he said quietly, his voice tinged with emotion, "there's something I need to tell you." Dan frowned, sensing that whatever was coming next wasn't going to be easy. "What is it?" The veteran hesitated, glancing around to ensure they were alone. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he revealed a secret that would change everything. "I'm not just a war hero, I'm also wanted by the government for something I didn't do." Dan froze. The words hung in the air like a thundercloud, heavy and impossible to ignore. "Wanted," he repeated, incredulous. "What are you talking about?" The veteran sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging under the weight of years of secrecy. He explained how, during his last deployment, he had uncovered evidence of corruption within the military ranks, evidence that implicated high-ranking officials in illegal activities. When he tried to report what he'd found, he was silenced, threatened, framed. "They made me look like the criminal," he said bitterly. "Now I'm living under an alias, trying to stay off their radar, while gathering enough proof to clear my name." Dan felt a mix of shock and anger bubbling inside him. How could such injustice exist? And why hadn't anyone spoken out about it sooner? But the veteran wasn't finished. That photo of us on the plane, it's brought attention to me again. Attention I can't afford right now. If the wrong people see it, they'll come after me. And this time, I might not survive." For a moment, neither man spoke. The gravity of the situation settled between them, pressing down with the force of 1,000 unanswered questions. Finally, Dan broke the silence. "We'll figure this out," he said firmly. "You're not alone in this anymore." With those words, the course of the story shifted once more. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had evolved into something far greater, a fight for justice, truth, and redemption. But the stakes were higher than ever before. Because now, the veteran's life depended on it. And so Dan made a promise, one that would set the stage for the ultimate showdown. He vowed to use his platform, his connections, and his determination to expose the truth, no matter the cost. Little did he know, this decision would lead to consequences neither of them could have imagined. Dan wasted no time. Over the next few days, he threw himself into investigating the veteran's case. Using his contacts in law enforcement and journalism, he pieced together a web of corruption that stretched far deeper than anyone had realized. High-ranking officials were involved, men who held power over not just the military, but entire government agencies. They were untouchable, or so they thought. Meanwhile, the veteran went into hiding. He knew the danger was real. The same people who had framed him wouldn't hesitate to silence him permanently, if given the chance. But even as he disappeared from public view, he continued working behind the scenes, sharing documents, recordings, and evidence with Dan. Together, they built a case strong enough to take down some of the most powerful figures in the country. The turning point came when Dan managed to secure an interview with a major news network. It wasn't easy. Many outlets were hesitant to cover the story, fearing retaliation from those implicated. But one brave journalist agreed to air the segment live, knowing full well the risks involved. On the night of the broadcast, millions tuned in. The veteran appeared via a secure video link, his face obscured to protect his identity. With Dan by his side, he recounted his harrowing tale, the corruption, the betrayal, the fight for survival. He presented irrefutable evidence, emails, audio recordings, and classified files that proved his innocence and exposed the truth. As the interview aired, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media erupted with outrage. Hashtags like #JusticeForHeroes and #ExposeTheCorrupt trended worldwide. Politicians faced pressure to act. Investigations were launched, and for the first time in years, the veteran felt a glimmer of hope. But the battle wasn't over yet. Within hours of the broadcast, threats began pouring in. Anonymous calls, ominous messages, and even attempts to hack into Dan's devices, all signaled that the powerful forces at play weren't ready to give up without a fight. One evening, while leaving his office, Dan found himself cornered by two men in dark suits. They didn't say a word, but their intentions were clear: back off, or else. Despite the fear creeping in, Dan stood firm. "You can intimidate me all you want," he told them, his voice steady. "But the truth is already out there, and nothing you do will stop it." The confrontation ended without violence, but the message was loud and clear: this fight was far from over. Yet Dan refused to back down. Instead, he rallied supporters, veterans, activists, everyday citizens, all united in the cause of justice. Together, they formed a movement that couldn't be silenced. And then, finally, the moment of reckoning arrived. A grand jury indictment was issued against the corrupt officials, based on the evidence uncovered by the veteran and Dan. For the first time, the powerful were held accountable. The veteran's name was cleared, and he emerged from the shadows, a hero once more. But the victory came at a cost. Both men knew that their lives would never be the same again. Enemies remained, battles still loomed ahead. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was peace, a peace born of knowing they had done the right thing, no matter the odds. In the weeks that followed, the world watched as justice unfolded. The veteran returned to his family, greeted by cheers and tears of joy. His story became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, truth and courage could prevail. Dan, too, found himself changed by the experience. What had started as a simple act of kindness had transformed into a crusade for justice. He realized that his platform wasn't just for commentary or debate, it was a tool to make real change happen, and so he vowed to continue fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. But as life began to return to some semblance of normalcy, a new development emerged, one that hinted at a deeper conspiracy still lurking beneath the surface. A mysterious package arrived at Dan's office, containing a single document, a classified file marked with the words "Eyes Only." Inside were details of another operation, one involving not just the military but international players. The veteran saw it first. "This isn't over," he said grimly. "There's more to uncover." Dan nodded, determination etched on his face. "Then we'll keep digging. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: when you stand up for what's right, you never stand alone." And with that, the stage was set for the next chapter, a chapter filled with danger, discovery, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. So what do you think? Would you have done the same as Dan, or would you have walked away from the fight? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next.